You can watch this event try to be two things at once: a sober anti-fraud crackdown on paper and a roaming grievance safari in practice. And the whiplash is the point. The setup is straightforward. Trump signs an executive order to create a federal anti-fraud task force, chaired by the vice president, with the FTC chair as vice chair. The pitch is simple too: coordinate agencies, share data, stop payments, prosecute, recover billions. Then the Q&A turns it into a multi-topic stress test: Iran, allies, voter rules, and the usual blame routing. So the event opens with a classic framing move: make it sound existential, then bring in the officials to give it administrative muscle. Watch how quickly the tone swings between policy and performance. Trump opens by treating fraud like a national emergency. He's not explaining the mechanics yet. He's setting emotional stakes, the big crackdown vibe, and the urgency framing. Then, Vance comes in with the institutional pitch: whole of government, chair and vice chair, coordinated enforcement, big taxpayer savings. It's the part where you're supposed to picture an org chart solving crime. And right on cue, the commentator does a quick appearance-based joke about Vance. It's a tonal interruption. Signal to the audience this is also a roast stream, not just policy intake. Trump ramps the fraud story by naming states, insisting it's not partisan, and then immediately treating it as partisan. He stacks accusations, ties it to immigration and crime, and points fingers at specific officials to make the problem feel personalized and prosecutable. Now we get the supporting cast doing what supporting casts do: anecdotes, villains, and a theory of why the system couldn't stop it before. You can hear the incentive: make coordination sound like a miracle cure. Miller goes hard on a system designed to funnel money story, using an anecdote to imply massive scale. The commentator nods along and adds extra heat, because anger is a bonding mechanism, and it keeps the narrative moving, even when numbers are fuzzy. Then we get the Minneapolis-style fraud story, framed as money diverted from vulnerable kids. The moral payload is doing most of the work, and the policy fix is stop siloing, share evidence, coordinate agencies, which is basically the government version of "have you tried turning it off and on?" Trump briefly detours into drug pricing wins, then snaps back: savings don't matter if fraud is a giant leak. It's a neat rhetorical move. Position fraud as the one bottleneck that explains why nothing else adds up. After the signing, the commentator chooses mockery over substance. It's the old move. If the event is meant to look historic, you shrink it back down to a punchline and keep the audience in vibes mode. In Q&A, Trump explains past inaction with the simplest villain model: leaders didn't stop fraud because they profit. Then a reporter tries to wedge Vance with an Iran question, and Vance just embraces the fraud czar identity while staying aligned on Iran. Here's the weird part: the event is about fraud, but the Q&A becomes a roaming demo of the entire brand. Iran gets the cinematic monologue, allies get scolded, and elections get pulled into the same moral universe. Trump goes full moral certainty on Iran: take threats literally, assume worst intent, justify strikes as prevention. The language is confident and cinematic, which is great for TV and terrible for verification. Then he pivots to allies. You can hear the grievance. Others hesitate. America acts. Then everyone shows up for the victory photo. He mixes it with Hormuz shipping risk talk, even admitting uncertainty, which is the closest thing. Late Q&A becomes channel surfing. Iran rumors dismissed, victory lap retold, then straight into voter ID and mail-in ballot attacks, plus random media scolding. It's not a policy agenda so much as a continuous audience calibration exercise. Finally, a concrete question: should the government halt Medicaid payments if there's evidence of fraud? Vance says yes, stop payments and prosecute through DOJ, while Trump reinforces that it's criminal. The commentator applauds and asks for more aggressive hunting, because escalation is always emotionally satisfying. One thing here: anti-fraud is an applause line, because fraud is real and unpopular. But the hard part isn't the slogan. It's evidence standards, due process, and not nuking legitimate services while you chase the numbers. Coordination helps, sure, but coordination without measurement is just a bigger meeting. The system question is, do we get better detection or just louder accusation routing? What I think happens next is predictable. Agencies will announce task force meetings, a few headline prosecutions, and a lot of talk about billions recovered. States will fight back if payments get threatened, because service disruption is political dynamite. And the incentives will keep pulling it toward theater, fraud, Iran, elections, whatever wins today's clip. The only stable antidote is boring automation, continuous audits, cross-checks, and clear thresholds that don't care who's in office.